It's a very touchy subject for some people, and it's a very deep food, what I'm going to present for you today. A couple months ago, I had an introduction for this subject when I was speaking about human heart and human propensities and how we are, what snares of Satan are waiting for us when we deal with the money. And I explained a lot of things from the Bible, how we are to deal and why we need the God's system of stewardship. And today I will just briefly, for those who missed the study, just a couple of Bible verses will remind you as a brief introduction into main subject. If any questions, note them. In the end, we'll have time for questions. The root of all evil, it's a love of money. In Proverbs 28:20 we read, "A faithful man shall abound with blessing, but he that maketh haste to be rich shall not be innocent." In 1 Timothy 6:10 we read, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." Not necessarily that rich people are in danger. Quite often, the poor people are in a greater danger than the rich people. Because they look to rich people, to their prosperity, and besides that they want money, they want their money, that envy steps in, the jealousy, and then covetousness, and all greedy, and they want to be rich so much, and they excuse themselves. "Oh, I am poor, I cannot pay tithe, I am poor, God has to understand my situation, I'm poor." So, what I'm trying to say that poor people sometimes have more snares than the rich people. A desire to be rich in 1 Timothy 6:9, "But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition." I like a variation of a translation from Young's literal translation, which is translating, "and those wishing to be rich," which is basically the same, but a little bit more clarity, adds clarity. Because that will kind of maybe, I don't know, but for me, who is not American, will means a future tense. So for me, it's hard to understand in that way. The remedy for the problem, for the love of money, is generosity. Is a fruit of a spirit. Is something what Jesus pointed to a widow. She gave more than anybody else. Those two little coins, those two pennies, what could you buy on those? Or how much support you could do of those 2 coins for a temple? None, basically. Why Jesus said she gave more than everybody? And from the bottom of her heart. That's the whole point. Jesus pointed to that lady, and she remained recorded without a name, but what she did, recorded in the pages of gospel. And we read through centuries. Because from the bottom of her heart, she loved the Lord so much that everything she had, she gave it. This is the solution what Jesus is bringing to us. A conversion from the bottom of your heart. When you give it to the Lord, you give it to the Lord. You're not giving to a pastor who might be not that honest, what you think. You're not giving to a church that somebody offended you in that church. You're giving to whom? To the Lord. The remedy for the problem, there are several tools God invented. And all the tithe is the Lord's. It is holy unto the Lord. Deuteronomy 18:4. The first fruit also of thy corn, of thy wine, and of thy oil, and the first of the fleece of thy sheep, shall thou give him. I means tribe of Levi. Speak unto the children of Israel that they bring me an offering of every man that giveth it willingly with his heart, he shall take my offering. So tithe, first fruits, and offerings. When we return to God what belongs to Him anyway, it's a test of our heart. It's a test of our loyalty. But I had a whole sermon on this. Those who missed it, you may ask a question later. I want to go to some technical part of the real stewardship, like hands-on on money. Should we pay tithe and offering today, living in a New Testament? Correct word, return. Matthew 23:23. Ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. Listen carefully. This ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. So, to pay tithe, this you're doing good that you do, and you have to do it. Jesus didn't say, oh, that is about to pass. Yes, you have to do it, and not forget the most important, the judgment, mercy, and faith. Because basically, if you pay tithe, but if you have no mercy to your brother and sister, your tithe is of no value in the eyes of God. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God has prospered him. That is Apostle Paul speaking of offering. Because tithe is not as much as you can or as much as you willing, but the offering whereas God has prospered him. So you can do more, give more. Cannot give more, give less, as much as you can. There are several kinds of returns to God. Tithes, offerings, first fruits, thank offerings, and personal pledges. We don't have time to discuss in details of each of these. We'll talk more on tithes. This is the most important, because this is not to be given according to what I think is fair. Because the word tithe, what is tithe? Tithe, a tenth of an individual's income pledged to the church. That's a dictionary definition. So basically it's a 10%. 10% is not fluctuating. You know, today is 5, tomorrow is 15. 10% is 10%. There are two kinds of tithes. What we call first tithe. It is holy unto the Lord. In Leviticus chapter 27, verse 30. And what we call second tithe. Why we call first and second? Because in the Leviticus, in Deuteronomy, Numbers, they are not only by comparing you can see the difference. But both of them are named tithe. This is why I kind of named it first and name it second, to differentiate between them. The tithe to be used for annual gatherings and for the Levites. And this tithe also is the tithe of the third year for the poor and needy. And we'll talk in details about it. What I'll try to do to differentiate and for you to understand clearly how Bible describes how we have to pay tithe, to whom to pay, how can we use it, how can we distribute it. So we will go first tithe and a second tithe. And there are a couple of questions with which we will answer to both. So I will have them side by side so you will be able to compare by yourself. So these questions which you will see listed, we will answer in regard to both. How is it referred to in the law? Who can use it or benefit from it? Can we distribute it according to our desires? Can we use it for various religious needs? Can we personally benefit from it? How much of my income is to be returned? What if we do not return it? So let's go through these questions and we'll study. How is it referred to in the law? First tithe, it says, the tithe, it is holy unto the Lord. The second tithe is for the Levite and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow. When we read in Hebrew chapter 7, Apostle Paul brings an illustration and he says that even Levites in his forefather Abraham paid tithe to a higher authority. So tithe, first tithe, is holy unto the Lord. No other man can use it. And we'll come to this question. Who can use it or benefit from it, from a first tithe? And behold, I have given the children of Levi all the tenth in Israel for an inheritance, for their service which they serve, even the service of the tabernacle of the congregation. But the tithes of the children of Israel I have given to the Levites. Let the elders, that's in 1 Timothy 5:17 and 18. Let the elders that rule well be counted worthy of double honor, especially they who labor in the word and doctrine. For the scripture says, Thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the corn, and the laborer is worthy of his reward. So, who can use it or benefit of a first tithe? In the Old Testament, there were priests and Levites. In the New Testament, who? Elders, apostles, and those who labor in the word of doctrine. Second tithe of the third year. At the end of 3 years, thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of thine increase the same year, and shall lay it up within thy gates. And the Levite, because he has no part nor inheritance within thee, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, which are within thy gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the work of thine hand which thou doest. So who can benefit from the second tithe? Poor, Levites, strangers, fatherless. Can we use it to give it to a charity? Can we use the second tithe to give to orphanage? Yes. Can we support a poor? Yes. That it was designed for. A couple more things. When thou hast made an end of tithing all the tithes of thine increase the third year, which is the year of tithing, and hast given it unto the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that they may eat within thy gates and be filled, then thou shalt say before the Lord thy God, I have brought away the hallowed things out of mine house, and also have given them unto the Levite, and unto the stranger, to the fatherless, and to the widow, according to all thy commandments. I believe it's clear. Can we distribute, next question, can we distribute tithe according to our desires? How about first tithe? Bring ye all the tithe into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. Leviticus chapter 27. All the tithe is holy unto the Lord. Numbers 18:21. I have given the children of Levi all the tenth. To whom we can give the tithe, first tithe? To priests. We have to return it to the church. Can it be distributed according to what I think is right or a worthy special offering? No. How about the second tithe? At the end of 3 years thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of thine increase the same year, and shall lay it up within thy gates. And the Levite and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow, which are within thy gates, shall come and shall eat. When thou hast made an end of tithing all the tithes of thine increase the 3rd year, and the last phrase, that they may eat within thy gates. What means within my gates? At my home, at my table, with my children. Second tithe, I can distribute it as I think would be wise to distribute. I can give a portion to a poor. I can give a portion to support Levites, like missionaries. I can give a portion to orphanage, to literature department. We'll discuss that a little bit later. Can we use it for various religious needs? First tithe. No. It is holy unto the Lord, and only Levites and from the tribe of Levi could use it. How about second tithe? Yes. You pull one of the envelopes from there and see how many sections it has. Field, local church, building fund, offering, foreign missions, missionary department, literature department, thanks, and so on. Can we use it for various religious needs, second tithe? And how? 1 Timothy 5:16. If any man or woman that believeth have widows, listen carefully, let them relieve them, and let not the church be charged, that it may relieve them that are widows indeed. For as touching the ministering to the saints, Apostle Paul says. It's very interesting, he points, that if you have a widow next door, living next in neighborhood, you don't have to go to church and says, hey brothers, there is a widow, go and help her. This is what is second tithe designed for. You give it portion to the church, but you also from the second tithe can help a widow next to you, so don't abuse the church funds. Just compare it to the Deuteronomy chapter 14, 28 and 29. And shall lay it up within thy gates, means at thy home. The stranger and the fatherless and the widow shall eat within thy gates, at your home, in your neighborhood. Can we personally benefit of it? First tithe? No. But the tithe of children of Israel have given to the Levites. I won't read, we already read this Bible verse. Can we personally benefit from it from the second tithe? In some cases. Listen, thou shalt truly tithe all the increase of thy seed that thy field bringeth forth year by year. It's not talking about the 3rd year tithe. And thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose to place his name there, the tithe of thy corn, of thy wine, and of thy oil. And if the way be too long for thee, so that thou art not able to carry it, or if the place be too far from thee, Then shalt thou turn it into money, and bind up the money in thine hand, and shall go unto the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And thou shalt bestow that money for whatsoever thy soul lusteth after. And thou shalt eat there before the Lord thy God, and thou shalt rejoice, thou and thy household, and the Levite that is within thy gate. Thou shalt not forsake him. What else second tithe can be used for? In the time of Israel, when a place of worship was chosen, that was Jerusalem, they have to travel 3 times a year. Is it costly to travel? Yes. What they could do? They could save a portion of a second tithe for those needs. And when they were traveling to a place of worship, and they could either carry it with them or exchange it into money and come and buy what they need for offering, what they need for food, what they need for a hotel to stay there, whatever they need there. So in other words, today, how we would apply it? There's a camp meeting in Tennessee. Can I use a part of my second tithe? Yes. To pay for hotel there, to pay for food, to pay for guests traveling to the camp meeting? Yes, we can use second tithe for that. But there is written clear, and I think that's quoted further, you cannot eat tithe within thy gate. I cannot eat at my home. Only at place of conference. Because I can say, no, I'm working for the church. I don't have to pay tithe. I'm working for the church anyway, so I'll eat everything. Is that correct? No. Yeah, we'll come to that point. How about second tithe? Can I use it for my home? I'm working for my church and I have to fix something at my home. Can I use the second tithe for that? No. Can I use it to travel to a conference? Yes. In our days, first tithe, priests, ministers and church leaders, general conference officers, field presidents, etc. Levites, elders, and other church officers, or as Apostle Paul was preaching, saying those who work in doctrines. Levites, second tithe. Levites within thy gates. You know that there were Levites who were living next to Jerusalem. They were serving in a temple. And there were Levites scattered throughout the land. There are missionary, literature, and health departments in the church, in our local churches. Roanoke Church is within my gates. This is my home church. Strangers, foreign missions, widows, actually widows and worthy poor, or Dorcas department. That's what the second tithe can be used for today. Let's do some simple math. A salary, which is 100%. 10% is the first tithe. 10% is the second tithe. And sometimes some other offering or thanksgiving may appear, which is 3%. As I said, may appear, not necessarily every month. Or first fruit, for example. If I have, let's say, a pear tree and this year I got a couple pounds of pears, that was the first, that is first fruit. How much? 3 pounds of pears. $1.99, that's about $6. I'm going to bring a pears to the church, or I can give $60. So those $60, that's those there, and those somewhere through 3%. Let's, for example, 2,000 income. 2,000. First tithe is 200. Second tithe is another 200. And the first fruits and offerings may occur this month, may not occur this month. Let's say I had only my pears or my first strawberries in my garden, or first tomatoes in my garden. It was only in July. So until July, I don't have first offering, first fruit offerings. The second tithe can be used for missionary department. Let's say $50 I distribute. I take the envelope, and I write $50 to missionary department, $50 to worthy poor, $50 to general fund, $50 I can save it for traveling to a conference in a couple months, in May, for example, to Tennessee. Or some other calls for special offering, like, for example, there is flooding, there is an earthquake, there is a special need, now, emergency. I can pull from my saving, from my second tithe, which I save within my gates at my home. Here you go. Now, what if everybody would pay faithfully second tithe? Just simple math. For example, missionary department. Each month, $50 from Melnichuk family. Multiply 12 months, that's 600. Multiply that per 5 families. Just 5 families. Let's say me, Brother Paul, Brother Surish, 5 families. 3,000 per year. Missionary department. Dorcas department. I remember Brother Gessner was mentioning that we need fund. We need money in that. If everybody gives every month $50 from second tithe, 3,000 per year. Brother Gessner, you think that would be better? And imagine the $50 you save per month for traveling to a conference. For $600, can you skip a camp meeting this year? Coming year? If you have $600? There is a camp meeting in Tennessee. There is another one in, let's say, in Washington, D.C. later on. Is it enough to travel to these 2 camp meetings? Yes. This is what the second tithe is designed for. Third year tithe. This is a very unique one. This is just an example for you. Just a layout, just for an example. For example, January, second tithe. I pay from $200, $150 I pay to the church, to several departments or building fund. I may save a portion for conference expense coming in May. In February, we may save a portion for special needs, like a flooding in India, for example. The third year tithe, second tithe, on the third year, could not be used within my gates. It has to be solely given to the worthy poor and Levites and widows. So all of $200, I have to give it to the church. In April, we may save a portion for a week of prayer offerings. We may save a portion for conference expense in May. In June, the third salary, which is kind of, every third year, every third salary, you give it to the church, the whole $200. Second tithe is not like an offering. It's not according to how much I desire to give, how much I'm feeling okay to give. Let's compare some. Offering. And thou shalt keep the feast of weeks, the feast of Pentecost, unto the Lord thy God with a tribute of a free will offering. That's called free will. How much I'm willing to give. Of thine hand, which thou shalt give unto the Lord thy God, according as the Lord thy God has blessed thee. If I was very blessed last year, or if I got a promotion and I got a new job, and I got a higher salary, Lord, this is my thanks to you. This is free will offering. How about the second tithe? Thou shalt truly tithe all the increase of thy seed, that the field bringeth forth year by year. And the end of 3 years thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of thine increase the same year. What means truly tithe? It means exact 10%. It's not how much I'm open to give. It's not how I'm feeling today. It's truly tithing. It's 10% even. That's speaking of the second tithe, and because it's pointing there very clear, the 3-year tithe and the tithe which is year to year. And that's the tithe that you can eat it before the Lord, and you can give it to poor and widow. That's not the speaking of a tithe which you cannot use, and that's solely for the Levites. Other returns to God. First fruits. The first fruits of thy land thou shalt bring into the house of the Lord thy God. What is the first fruit? Let's say you plant tomato in May. In July, you have, let's say, 2 pounds, the very first tomatoes you picked up from your bushes in your garden. And that may be just a little bit, 2 pounds, 3 pounds of tomatoes. How much that cost? $5, $6. That's the first fruit. Those $6, bring it to the house of the Lord. In those days, they were bringing the actual fruits, the actual vegetables, the actual crops, whatever, or the actual, animal, if it was from a flock. Today, we live in different era. We have money, we have checks, cards. We return $6. We make a check for $6. Thank offerings. That's a really free will called offering. This is as if something happened in your life, and you were preserved. You were facing a death, and miraculously you were saved. Give a thanks offering to God, as much as you can do from your income. And personal pledges. That is really personal pledges. If you pledge to God, like for example, a story of my uncle. His business, he's growing tomato. He lives in Moldova, in Europe, and he is selling tomatoes. That is his income. And one year he said, all my tomatoes, I did everything like every year, and all my tomatoes started to a certain disease, some spots on the tomatoes. I prayed to the Lord and says, Lord, if you will bless my tomatoes, and they will not perish, and I will sell them, I will give you a quarter of the income to you. Guess what? From that day on, all tomatoes were beautiful, formed, without any defect. He sold everything, and he returned to the Lord a quarter of his sales income. That is a personal pledge. What if we do not return it? Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithe unto the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, says the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. Paying tithe, first and second. In my life, I rarely met people who had problem with the first tithe. We have to pay it. But I met a lot of people who has problem with the second tithe. Test God. Let him prove that he will never fail. But a lack of faith, this is the problem of our generation. On our every dollar bill, even on the coin, it says, in God we trust. Do we trust in God? Do we trust that, as a psalmist says, I never saw a righteous man begging for food? There is that scattereth and yet increases, and there is that withholdeth more than is meet, but it tendeth to poverty. 2 Corinthians 9:6. But this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. You may trick the IRS, but not God. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. I try to be as short as possible. I'm open to your questions.
Well, there's something special about the first offering also.
Yes. The first fruit or firstborn?
Fruit.
The first offering, fruit offering, cannot be used as a wish. It's like a tithe. It's to be brought to the house of the Lord. I said, I try to be as short as possible, not to abuse your brain in the afternoon after a good lunch. But there are Bible verses. For example, if you take a computer and you type the first fruit, you'll pull all the Bible verses. And when you compare them all together, you have a very clear picture that it was like a tithe, first fruit. And people had to be faithful in bringing the first fruits. Like they had to be faithful in tithe, first and second. No other questions. Everything is clear or nothing is clear? Well, brothers and sisters, you have to understand me correct. This is not Gennady here begging for your money. And when you pay your tithe or second tithe, you're not paying me or Brother Suresh or Brother Silva or Brother Daniel Lee, the church leader. This is a system designed by God to support His people in those days and to support His church today. And this is how we send missionaries. This is how we pay salaries to our ministers and elders. And there is a Bible verse says, and pay the priests so they should be encouraged to do their services gladly. What the situation in Ukraine? Now is there war in Ukraine. The economy went down. People are really struggling financially because people started to get less. Many people lost their jobs. The tithe income, tithe revenue decreased. What they did, they had no other options, but all the ministers and workers receive only 50% of their salary today in Ukraine. Only 50%. Now imagine you have $2,000 and only your mortgage is $1,000 and now your salary is $1,000. What do? Do you really have a lot of time to work on the Lord's vineyard? No. Because you look to support your family. You don't want to lose your house. You need to pay your bills. So you're looking for extra job. You're working at night. You're working at evenings. This is why it says, pay to the priests their salary, not salaries. This is not a biblical word, salaries. Pay to the priest and bring your first fruits and offerings and tithes, so there might be food, so they would do their service joyfully. Because if they have a lot of worries how to support my families, I have no time to concentrate on the work of God. This is why, but this is, let's say I'm a millionaire. My tithe per month, $50,000. I can support all the workers in the East Coast. You don't have to pay tithe. I will support. Don't worry, brothers. Can you use that to justify yourself not paying? You remember the widow with the 2 coins? She did not give. That didn't matter, for let's say if you give $5, what your $5 will help to build that project there? To buy a couple screws maybe. But it's not about how much you give. It's about how honest you are with the Lord. You can trick IRS. But if you're not faithful in a first or second tithe, you're robbing God. I mean, it's very clear. You cannot go away from it. So this is why this is not Gennadi's theory. This is Bible, the Word of God. Yes, sister.
That's a question I'm a little bit confused about, because I've always tithed 10% of my paycheck, but I don't understand the second time, because it's saying second year and then third year. I don't understand, is that something you tithe every week out of your paycheck, or is that something you literally do every year, or?
In the time of old, they did not had salary. They were living on what they were sowing on the fields. Then at the harvest time, whatever was the profit of their field, of their land, that was their income. For example, they had, let's say, a couple tons of corn, couple tons of wheat. They had maybe couple, let's say 500 pounds of apples or some other fruits, and a couple tons of grape.